Hi there, I'm Peter Millard, and this is 10 Minute Workshop, where 10 minutes in the workshop is never enough. In the workshop this week, well, I'm bringing this Playing with Spraying series to a close with a closer look at Graco's Ultramax cordless airless sprayer and how it's done over the last 4 or 5 months. That's coming up next. So yeah, I think it's about time I knocked this series on the head, to be perfectly honest. I'm not done with spraying. There's plenty more to come on this story. There's a knockdown spray booth to build. There's a filtration extraction unit to come. I want to compare this little guy to a couple of much cheaper sprayers to see what the differences are. But I'll do those as discrete, separate videos, because I think this part of the story is pretty much done with now. You've followed me from, if you've watched the whole series, and thank you for staying out with me. If you have, then you've followed me from a total spraying novice over the last 4, almost 5 months, developing, certainly not into a spraying ninja, but somebody who's mildly competent at getting paint on what I'm aiming at. Let's have a quick recap and see how the Graco has actually fared. So I'm still getting dinged a bit in the comments on some of these videos by people saying, "Oh, you're using the wrong tool for the job. You should be using something." You know what the right tool for the job is? It's the one you've got. I chose this very specifically for the job that I had, with a view to being able to use it going forwards for the little bits and pieces that I had in mind. I outlined all of my reasons for choosing the Graco cordless airless back in part 2 of this series, and those haven't changed. It remains a compact, elegant solution for spraying on the go. If spraying is a huge part of your business, then no, it's not going to be the only sprayer you need. If you've got a big industrial sprayer of some kind, one of these is going to be very handy for doing little touch-ups. But the point is, this is capable of doing whole rooms if that's something you need to do. I do know a couple of professional painters and decorators who've used these extensively and don't have any sort of issues with them. Again, this was all a journey of discovery for me. I've never really sprayed anything before. I've never sprayed gloss on walls before. That was an interesting exercise. Come to that, I've never sprayed gloss before. So again, lots to learn throughout the last sort of 4 or 5 months. But in the process, the Graco has been an absolute champ. It has managed to deal with absolutely everything I've thrown at it, every paint type from emulsion to gloss to eggshell to primer, from all the usual suspects when it comes to manufacturers: Johnson's, Dulux, Leyland, Benjamin Moore, Tikkurila, Farrow & Ball. They were all dealt with without any real problem whatsoever. The only niggle I've had with it is this constant, persistent overspray, and I don't really think I've gone into enough detail perhaps on that in these videos. I've done it early on. I did a few little video snippets on Twitter about how bad this was. I think I've resolved this now. Lots of people are saying, "Oh well, you always get overspray because there's paint in the air," because that's the nature of what you're doing. You're atomizing, vaporizing paint so that you can put a thin layer of it, and obviously some's going to get in the atmosphere. Well, of course they will. But this was really, really bad. It wasn't until recently, to be honest, that I felt like I've made any progress on that. By changing the tip. I actually changed, not the tip, there are some tiny little spare parts that you get when you change your tip, and it's a little seal in there, and that obviously is critical to the seal against the tip, and I think that was either faulty or just not fitted right. I didn't mess with this end of it at all, other than turn it sideways and horizontal. Maybe it wasn't tightened on enough. I think it was. Maybe the tip was faulty. I don't know. Either way, when I took this off for a proper deep clean, there was an awful lot of paint on the inside. Now, since I've cleaned that out and put a new seal in there, it's been squeaky clean, no problem at all with that. And the overspray, the paint in the air, the dust does seem to be significantly reduced. So that's some progress. We'll keep an eye on this, and obviously I'll keep you updated. But I think now I've resolved the issue of overspray. It's certainly significantly reduced, and it's certainly no worse than what I had when I tried spraying with an HVLP previously. But it brings up an interesting question. Who is something like the Graco for? So let's deal with the easy question first. Who isn't this for? Well, it's obviously not for somebody for whom spraying is a big part of their business. If you're spending 4, 5, 6 hours a day spraying, I wouldn't recommend just having this as your only sprayer. You're more likely to need a bigger industrial sized machine that'll just hook into a 10-litre tub of paint and spray straight from that. This is a small, lightweight, portable device. It only carries a litre. It doesn't spray for very long before you need to refill it. It's probably not really for entire rooms, and yet you can do that without too much trouble. It is principally for smaller bits and pieces. So if that describes you, it certainly describes me and my work going forwards. The odd door here and there, the odd wardrobe carcass and that kind of thing. Well, it may well be for you. It's not going to be for people who are on a very tight budget. You know, this is a 600 quid spray gun. The cheapest you can get it is 400 for the corded version, 500 for the Ultra, which is the non-solvent spraying version. It's reasonably priced for a handheld airless sprayer, but they're certainly not cheap. You know, 400, 500, 600 notes is still a substantial sum of money. So it's not for people on a tight budget. It might be for the well-heeled, keen hobbyist. But there are, if you care mostly about the finish, then there are certainly cheaper ways of getting a good sprayed finish than going the airless route. It's a bit like many of these things. You have to really want the benefits that they have in order to justify the cost of this. And for me, that was pretty straightforward. It was pretty obvious. It was convenience, size, all in one package. The idea that it's self-contained, the fast changeover from one colour or finish to another. So if going from primer to eggshell, for example, you can do that quickly and easily. And the fast cleanup time. Yes, it's not as fast as putting a roller in a tray, in a plastic bag, but it's much faster, 10 minutes or so, than most other sprayers. So is it all sweetness and light, puppy dogs and kittens? Well, not really. One of the possible issues is weight at 2.4 kilos. This is pretty hefty, but that's when it's empty. You throw a litre of paint in there, or even a litre and a quarter with a bigger cup, and that's going to be quite a weight. Not as weighty, for example, as a plunge saw, but then you don't hold a plunge saw out at arm's length for an hour at a time. Certainly at the end of spraying an entire room after 40 or 50 minutes, I was definitely using two hands, but a bit like a two-handed backhand in tennis. It gives you more control, but it restricts your reach. The other thing I quite like to see is better support, to be perfectly honest. I contacted Graco's help a couple of times via their Twitter account, and they basically referred me to their website, where there are a great many sort of standard videos, all of them in American. We pay a premium for these products. I think we should qualify for at least a localized voiceover, or hey, maybe make some British videos for the British market. If you wanted some help with that, I might know a guy. The only other potential sort of concern might be longevity of these smaller devices. The previous generation of Graco handhelds did have problems with the pumps lunching themselves, and the cost of repair was actually more than the cost of a new device. These actually have user replaceable pumps, so obviously they've learned a lesson there, but the pump is a couple £100, so it's not going to be something you want to change every year. I asked Graco for a duty cycle for the pump, and they wouldn't be drawn to giving X number of litres. They said it was entirely dependent on the type of paints being used and the type of cleaning that they had, which is fair enough, but it would be nice to have a broad general idea of how long we think these things are going to last. Other than that, a bit more help for novice users wouldn't go amiss. For example, you get a pair of these with every tip, and there's instructions on how to fit them, but no information about when you need to do that. That's the kind of thing that can really throw you if you're a new user to this kind of thing. But let's cut to the $64,000 question. Would I buy one of these again, having used it for 4 or 5 months? And the short answer is no, I wouldn't. I would buy the Ultra, not the Ultramax. I bought the Ultramax because I figured that a top-of-the-line model would be easier to shift, easier to move on. if the spraying thing didn't work out. I'm very happy with spraying, and there will be more to the spraying story. But if I was buying now, I would go for the Ultra, because I'm not interested in solvent-based paints. An Ultra cordless would do me very nicely. If you need to save 100 quid, then the Ultra corded is the cheapest way of getting onto the platform. I've got to say, they sell the Ultra corded for basically the same price as a pair of DeWalt batteries and charger would cost you, so it's actually quite a clever way of getting batteries and charger if you think you might want to look at the DeWalt bare tool selection in future. It opens up a bit more, a few more opportunities for you. One thing I don't think they do is, if you are already a DeWalt user, I don't think they'll sell you a bare tool Graco. That's a bit of a shame, because it means that you're being forced to buy a couple of batteries and a charger that you don't necessarily want, that you may already have. So that seems like a pretty good place to draw things to a close. I hope you've enjoyed joining me on this journey from being a spraying novice to being mildly competent. If you have, do consider subscribing, then you'll be notified when I post my videos on the knockdown spray booth, the workshop filtration units, and of course the comparison between the Graco Ultramax and the much cheaper sprayers that are coming out in the due course. I also want to take a minute to thank my Patreon supporters, whose contributions really do help keep the lights on the channel. And if you've enjoyed this series, or if I've just saved you 100 quid by recommending the Ultra over the Ultramax, please do consider supporting me at patreon.com/10-minute workshop. But that's everything for this week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.